Next, I'd like to introduce Jiten Shah. Jiten has over 25 years of experience developing and implementing business risk management processes and conducting quantitative risk assessment studies for his clients. He brings an extensive array of skills that include risk management process improvement, risk analysis and quantification, and risk prevention and mitigation. I'd like to introduce Jiten Shah.
So I work for Baker Risk. We provide solutions to companies and government agencies to prevent or mitigate accidents that affect people and property. One of the benefits of working for this company is that they encourage us all to volunteer on industry committees like the American Process, API, CCPS, NFPA. These organizations are industry committees that allow me to personally work on projects and guidelines and technical standards that achieve the same mission that my company wants and that I personally believe in promoting, which is the promotion of improvement. I'm getting some feedback here. So, I'm sorry, the mission of these committees all align with the mission of my company and my personal belief of promoting and improving the safety of our customers. I have in my career conducted over 300 quantitative risk assessments. 50 plus of those studies are on alkylation units. We are all risk analysts. We're all risk analysts in that we apply risk in our day-to-day life to navigate through the day from driving to something as simple as walking across the street. In conducting these studies, it's important that we should not confuse the hazard with the risk of the activity. If, for example, I were to tell you that in 2014, 70,000 pedestrians were hit by vehicles, and of those, 4,884 of these were fatalities. If that was the only information I provide you, would you want to cross the street? I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't want to let my kids cross the street. But now, if you consider the safety systems that are provided, in that we have crosswalks. For higher traffic regions, we have stop signs. For school crossings, we have crossing guards. And for even higher traffic, we have stoplights. If I factor all those safety systems in, and I said that the risk of being struck by a vehicle in 2014 was 1 in 47,000 per year, now all of a sudden the picture changes. It's not that risky. I'm willing to cross the street to get to work, to get to school, to go to my favorite restaurant. Similarly, using just the EPA circles provide only half the story. They only provide you hazard information. In fact, the circles indirectly and incorrectly depict the hazards the hazards of a toxic release as a circular zone, when in reality, it is more of an elliptical zone that travels downwind from the release source. So to claim that the entire impact area of the circle is what is affected by a MHF release is an incorrect claim. It's based on an inappropriate use of data. Even the EPA recognizes this, and they post on their website to not use these circles of death, to not call them that, but they are used more for a planning and communication purpose. These circles of death should not be used to communicate information incorrectly to the public. Unfortunately, some have latched onto these and provide this as confusion and fear to the community. The full story of understanding the risk of an MHF unit or of any activity is through a risk assessment process. So Dr. Abbas talked about air travel in his talk, and I'm going to talk a little bit about comparing air travel versus road travel. If we focus again on just half the story and talk about just the hazard associated with flying or driving, in an accident, the worst case accident for an airplane crash could be in the thousands of fatalities. We know 9/11 was an intentional crash where we had 3,000 fatalities. In a car crash, the most you probably would get is tens of fatalities, a much smaller number. If that's the only information I'm using to make my decision, why would I allow air travel? But when I factor the likelihood of the crashes and use a risk process, that process shows that air travel is actually 10 times less risky than driving. In fact, in 2014, mainline commercial jet travel resulted in 0 fatalities. The Torrance MHF unit has gone through a risk analysis study multiple times in the 90s when that technology was being considered here. It was conducted by MRDC. It evaluated the detectors, the water mitigation system, the AES system, and the barriers using the protocol developed by the Center for Chemical Process Safety, which is a generally recognized good engineering practice by OSHA, EPA, and the CSB. This process was independently reviewed by the safety advisor. The safety advisor also conducted in their review a seismic analysis to make sure that the earthquake risks were considered. Torrance Fire Department hired a separate expert to review this document as well. In addition to these reviews and these studies, the CalARP studies look at seismic impacts and reviewed periodically on a 5-year cycle to make sure that the refinery's seismic profile is appropriately managed. The resultant conclusion from these studies showed at the time that the risk of an MHF unit with the appropriate mitigation systems that I talked about is 24 times less risky than a comparable sulfuric alkylation unit that would produce the same amount of alkylate. So don't listen to half the story by only focusing on the hazard. I implore each of you to pay attention to the full story and use risk as the basis for making decisions. Risk analysis is the recognized standard to evaluate the safety of competing technologies. From aerospace to refining to the day-to-day activity that we all use risk analysis in, for example, to choose the safety systems we would put in our car when we buy a car. Now, I know this is a lot of information in a short time. It's taken me 10 years when I was learning how to do this to get to the point where I felt proficient enough to come up in front of people like you and talk about risk management and risk analysis. I can go on for hours and days on this subject. I'm willing to answer your questions for as long as it takes. Just let me know and ask the questions when we're done here. Thank you.